The message from Prime Minister Modi's government to Xi Jinping's CCP is loud and clear. India will prioritize its defense and national security over Chinese businesses. In 2024, only 2,000 visas have been issued by India to Chinese nationals. This figure was 200,000 or 1,000 times higher in 2019, a year before India-China border tensions erupted, with both India and China suffering fatalities along the border for the first time in decades. Beijing has repeatedly asked New Delhi for visas for thousands of Chinese nationals, to which India says no thank you. An Indian cabinet minister speaking on the condition of anonymity told agencies, quote, India's national economic security cannot be compromised for a few pieces of silver. Visas will be issued for Chinese technicians and businessmen only after screening, with assurance that travel conditions will not be violated, unquote. India has also repeatedly rejected Chinese requests to restart direct flights. New Delhi says first, CCP must return to the status quo ante in eastern Ladakh, where Chinese troops are still locked in a face-off with the Indian army after the PLA salami sliced into previously neutral territory and 21 rounds of border talks have failed to break a deadlock. As usual, the mouthpiece of Xi Jinping's CCP, the Global Times, has been poking India on this issue, publishing stories highlighting the losses to India's electronics industry in particular. Over 200 Chinese applications for investment opportunities have still not been approved by the Indian government. This is a continuation of India's tit-for-tat with China. India is boosting ties with Taiwan in response to China's CPEC through POK, while New Delhi also restored 30 ancient names in Tibet in response to Chinese poking in Arunachal Pradesh. While India is also boosting its military alliances with Quad allies for mutual security. Since 2020 Galwan clashes, the Indian government has implemented a near-total ban on Chinese visas and direct flights from China. India maintains that PLA's salami-slicing tactics along the border are bound to impact all spheres of bilateral relationship. Moreover, the impact of visa restrictions on China's workers is questionable. India has issued only 1,500 visas to Chinese nationals in the past 8 months, out of which nearly 1,000 were for the Indian electronics industry. Despite these restrictions, according to official data disclosed on the 14th of June this month, India's merchandise exports have surged 9% this year. Electronics, petroleum and engineering goods have benefited with increased self-reliance. Export of electronics goods reached $29.1 billion in financial year 24 compared to $23.5 billion in financial year 23. Now, the first visa restrictions were driven by COVID compulsions, with the pandemic emerging from Wuhan in China and going on to cripple the entire world. But India just continued this near-total ban on visas and flights from China. In a sign that this Indian move has rattled Xi Jinping's CCP, its propaganda mouthpiece, the Global Times, published another editorial urging India to restart direct flights for its citizens and tourists. But these repeated Chinese requests have fallen on deaf ears as India remains resolute in prioritizing national security over trade or tourism. In 2019, there were nearly 550 direct flights between the two nuclear neighbors, with Indian carriers like Air India and Indigo flying 168 direct flights, while 371 were flown by Chinese carriers including China Southern, China Eastern and Air China. However, now tourists or civilians must take connecting flights either through Dubai, Hong Kong or Singapore, resulting in a loss of traffic, while businesses have also been redirected to these hubs. However, Indigo does fly 7 direct flights in a week from New Delhi to Hong Kong, from where passengers can enter and exit China. Indigo CEO Peter Elbers told agencies, quote, "When the time is right and the government comes to a mutual understanding of how to move forward, we'll assess the market." Meanwhile, Campbell Wilson, the CEO of Air India, says India-China route, quote, "would seem to be a huge potential market. However, things are moving, quote, beyond our level." It seems China now is giving India lessons in wisdom and philosophy, with Chinese ambassador quoted saying, "Protectionism is like drinking poison to quench thirst." But India remains unmoved. India is the world's 5th largest economy, on course to overtaking Japan and Germany to become the world's 3rd largest economy before 2030, despite implementing all these restrictions on China. According to Reuters, the risk is higher for China. While India's aviation industry is booming, Chinese tourism industry is struggling to pick up post the pandemic. China wants Indian tourists and trade, even though Beijing may want to project that New Delhi is suffering more. After all, in 2019, nearly 869,000 Indian tourists and civilians entered China, and Beijing is keen to get them back along with Indian trade. But the Indian government move is also driven by motives to protect the Indian industry from Chinese business malpractices. Telecom giants like Vivo were found to be flouting Indian laws and laundering funds to China. Enforcement Directorate charged Vivo, accusing the Chinese company of money laundering and violating Indian visa norms by its workers and executives. Vivo, of course, rejected the charges, accused Indian government of harassment, and issued a statement challenging these accusations. But the strangest thing is, despite India's large-scale restrictions on China, coupled with border tensions at the LAC and increased military build-up by the Indian Army and Indian Air Force to challenge the PLA in occupied Tibet, bilateral trade between the two countries continues to thrive, reaching a whopping $118 billion in 23-24, as China even overtook the United States to become India's top trading partner. Much of this is driven by lower costs due to geographic proximity than other source countries. Meanwhile, the trade deficit with China has reached $38.1 billion in just the initial 5 months of this ongoing financial year. Now, this remains a real concern, and the Indian government is resolute in taking steps to end reliance on trade with China and promote Atmanirbhar Bharat. China has bold ambitions of challenging US dominance in the Indo-Pacific. Coupled with CCP's expansionist ambitions, this is a dangerous mix. Last year, CCP released what it called was a new official map of China, which not only encroached on Indian territories along the LAC in Ladakh, Aksai Chin and Arunachal, but also violated the maritime sovereignty of all ASEAN nations, including the Philippines, Vietnam, Indonesia, and of course Taiwan. But while ASEAN nations independently may not be able to challenge China without US support, Beijing clearly has made a miscalculation with India, the world's fourth largest military and soon to be the third biggest economy, which is willing to confront Chinese salami slicing tactics head on. Any confrontation is going to prove as costly for China as it will be for India. What do you believe? Should India prioritize national defense over trade with China? Leave a comment, hit the like button and subscribe to Inconnect News for daily updates on current affairs and geopolitics.